Chapter 33 of Commentary on the Book of Genesis. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Melvin Lee. Commentary on the Book of Genesis by Matthew Henry, Chapter 33. Genesis chapter 33. We read in the former chapter how Jacob had power with God and prevailed. Here we find what power he had with men too, and how his brother Esau was mollified, and on a sudden reconciled to him. For it is written, Proverbs chapter 25, verse 7, when a man's ways please the Lord, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him. Here is numeral 1, a very friendly meeting between Jacob and Esau. Verses 1 through 4. Numeral 2, their conference at their meeting, in which they vie with each other in civil and kind expressions. Their discourse is, number 1, about Jacob's family, verses 5 through 7. Number 2, about the present he had sent, verses 8 through 11. Number 3, about the progress of their journey, verses 12 through 15. Numeral 3, Jacob's settlement in Canaan, his house, ground, and altar, verses 16 through 20. Jacob's interview with Esau, BC 1739. Verse 1, and Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau came, and with him 400 men. And he divided the children unto Leah, and unto Rachel, and unto the 2 handmaids. Verse 2, and he put the handmaids and their children foremost, and Leah and her children after, and Rachel and Joseph hindermost. Verse 3, and he passed over before them, and bowed himself to the ground 7 times, until he came near to his brother. Verse 4, and Esau ran to meet him, and embraced him, and fell on his neck, and kissed him, and they wept. Here, number 1, Jacob discovered Esau's approach, verse 1. Some think that this lifting up his eyes denotes his cheerfulness and confidence, in opposition to a dejected countenance. Having by prayer committed his case to God, he went on his way, and his countenance was no more sad. 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 18. Note, those that have cast their care upon God may look before them with satisfaction and composure of mind, cheerfully expecting the issue, whatever it may be. Come what will, nothing can come amiss to him whose heart is fixed, trusting in God. Jacob sets himself upon his watchtower to see what answer God will give to his prayers. Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 1. Numeral 2, he put his family into the best order he could to receive him, whether he should come as a friend or as an enemy, consulting their decency if he came as a friend, and their safety if he came as an enemy, verses 1 and 2. Observe what a different figure these 2 brothers made. Esau is attended by a guard of 400 men, and looks big. Jacob is followed by a cumbersome train of women and children that are his care, and he looks tender and solicitous for their safety. And yet Jacob had the birthright, and was to have the dominion, and was every way the better man. Note, it is no disparagement to very great and good men to give a personal attendance to their families and to their family affairs. Jacob, at the head of his household, set a better example than Esau at the head of his regiment. Numeral 3, at their meeting the expressions of kindness were interchanged in the best manner that could be between them. Number 1, Jacob bowed to Esau, verse 3. Though he feared Esau as an enemy, yet he did obeisance to him as an elder brother, knowing and remembering perhaps that when Abel was preferred in God's acceptance before his older brother Cain, yet God undertook for him to Cain, that he should not be wanting in the duty and respect owing by a younger brother. Unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. Chapter 4, verse 7. Note 1. The way to recover peace where it has been broken is to do our duty, and pay our respects upon all occasions, as if it had never been broken. It is the remembering and repeating of matters that separates friends, and perpetuates the separation. 2. A humble submissive carriage goes a great way towards the turning away of wrath. Many preserve themselves by humbling themselves. The bullet flies over him that stoops. Number 2. Esau embraced Jacob. Verse 4. He ran to meet him, not in passion, but in love, and as one heartily reconciled to him. He received him with all the endearments imaginable, embraced him, fell on his neck, and kissed him. Some think that when Esau came out to meet Jacob, it was with no bad design, but that he brought his 400 men only for state, that he might pay so much the greater respect to his returning brother. It is certain that Jacob understood the report of his messengers otherwise. Chapter 32, verses 5 and 6. Jacob was a man of prudence and fortitude, and we cannot suppose him to admit to a groundless fear to such a degree as he did this, nor that the Spirit of God would stir him up to pray such a prayer as he did for deliverance from a merely imaginary danger. And if there was not some wonderful change wrought upon the spirit of Esau at this time, I see not how wrestling Jacob could be said to obtain such power with men as to denominate him a prince. Note 1. God had the hearts of all men in his hands, and he can turn them when and how he pleases, by a secret, silent, but resistless power. He can of a sudden convert enemies into friends, as he did 2 Sauls, one by restraining grace, 1 Samuel chapter 26, verse 21 and 25, the other by renewing grace, Acts chapter 9, verses 21 and 22. Number 2. It is not in vain to trust in God, and to call upon him in the day of trouble. Those that do so often find the issue much better than they expected. Number 3. They both wept. Jacob wept for joy to be thus kindly received by his brother whom he had feared, and Esau perhaps wept for grief and shame to think of the bad design he had conceived against his brother, which he found himself strangely and unaccountably prevented from executing. Verse 5. And he lifted up his eyes, and saw the women and the children, and said, Who are those with thee? And he said, The children which God hath graciously given thy servant. Verse 6. Then the handmaidens came near, they and their children, and they bowed themselves. Verse 7. And Leah also with her children came near, and bowed themselves. And after came Joseph near, and Rachel, and they bowed themselves. Verse 8. And he said, What meanest thou by all this drove which I met? And he said, These are to find grace in the sight of my Lord. Verse 9. And Esau said, I have enough, my brother, keep that thou hast unto thyself. Verse 10. And Jacob said, Nay, I pray thee, if now I have found grace in thy sight, then receive my present at my hand. For therefore I have seen thy face, as though I had seen the face of God, and thou wast pleased with me. Verse 11. Take, I pray thee, my blessing that is brought to thee, because God hath dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. And he urged him, and he took it. Verse 12. And he said, Let us take our journey, and let us go, and I will go before thee. Verse 13. And he said unto him, My Lord knoweth that the children are tender, and the flocks and herds with young are with me. And if men should overdrive them one day, all the flock will die. Verse 14. Let my Lord, I pray thee, pass over before his servant, and I will lead on softly, according as the cattle that goeth before me, and the children be able to endure, until I come unto my Lord unto Seir. Verse 15. And Esau said, Let me now leave with thee some of the folk that are with me. And he said, What needeth it? Let me find grace in the sight of my Lord. We have here the discourse between the two brothers at their meeting, which is very free and friendly, without the least intimation of the old quarrel. It was the best way to say nothing of it. They converse. Numeral 1. About Jacob's retinue. Verse 5 through 7. 11 or 12 little ones, the oldest of them not 14 years old, followed Jacob closely. Who are these? says Esau. Jacob had sent him an account of the increase of his estate, chapter 32, verse 5, but made no mention of his children, perhaps because he would not expose them to his rage if he should meet him as an enemy, or would please him with the unexpected sight if he should meet him as a friend. Esau therefore had reason to ask, Who are those with thee? To which common question Jacob returns a serious answer, such as became his character. They are the children which God hath graciously given thy servant. It had been a sufficient answer to the question, and fit enough to be given to profane Esau if he had only said, They are my children. But then Jacob would not have spoken like himself, like a man whose eyes were ever towards the Lord. Note, it becomes us not only to do common actions, but to speak of them after a godly sort. 3 John 6. Jacob speaks of his children. 1. As God's gifts. They are a heritage of the Lord. Psalms chapter 125, verse 3. Chapter 112, verse 9. Chapter 107, verse 41. 2. As choice gifts he hath graciously given them, though they were many, and now much his care, and as yet but slenderly provided for, yet he accounts them great blessings. His wives and children hereupon come up in order and pay their duty to Esau, as he had done before them. Verses 6 and 7. For it becomes the family to show respect to those to whom the master of the family shows respect. Numeral 2. About the present he had sent him. Number 1. Esau modestly refused it because he had enough and did not need it. Verse 9. Note, those who wish to be considered men of honor will not seem to be mercenary in their friendship. Whatever influence Jacob's present had upon Esau to pacify him, he would not have it thought that it had any, and therefore he refused it. His reason is, I have enough, I have much. So the word is, so much that he was not willing to take anything that was his brother's. Note 1. Many that come short of spiritual blessings, and are out of covenant, yet have much of this world's wealth. Esau had what was promised him, the fatness of the earth, and a livelihood by his sword. 2. It is a good thing for those that have much to know that they have enough, though they have not so much as some others have. Even Esau can say, I have enough. Number 3. Those that are content with what they have must show it by not coveting what others have. Esau bids Jacob keep what he had to himself, supposing he had more need of it. Esau, for his part, needs it not, either to supply him, for he is rich, or to pacify him, for he has reconciled. We should take heed lest at any time our covetousness impose upon the courtesy of others, and meanly take advantage of their generosity. Number 2. Jacob affectionately urges him to accept it, and prevails. Verse 10 and 11. Jacob sent it through fear. Chapter 32, verse 20. But the fear being over, he now importunes his acceptance of it for love, to show that he desired his brother's friendship, and did not merely dread his wrath. Two things he urges. 1. The satisfaction he had in his brother's favor, of which he thought himself bound to make this thankful acknowledgment. It is a very high compliment that he passes upon him. I have seen thy face, as though I had seen the face of God. That is, I have seen thee reconciled to me, and at peace with me, as I desire to see God reconciled. Or the meaning is that Jacob saw God's favor to him in Esau's. It was a token for good to him that God had accepted his prayers. Note: creature comforts are comforts indeed to us when they are granted as answers to prayer, and are tokens of our acceptance with God. Again, it is matter of great joy to those that are of peaceable and affectionate disposition to recover the friendship of those relations with whom they have been at variance. 2. The competency he had of this world's goods. God has dealt graciously with me. Note: if what we have in this world increase under our hands, we must take notice of it with thankfulness to the glory of God, and own that therein he has dealt graciously with us, better than we deserve. It is he that gives power to get wealth. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 18. He adds, and I have enough, I have all. So the word is, Esau's enough was much, but Jacob's enough was all. Note: a goodly man, though he have but little in the world, yet may truly say, I have all. 1. Because he has the God of all, and has all in him. All is yours if you be Christ's. 1 Corinthians 3, verse 22. 2. Because he has the comfort of all. I have all and abound. Philemon chapter 4, verse 18. He that has much would have more, but he that thinks he has all is sure he has enough. He has all in prospect. He will have all shortly, when he comes to heaven. Upon this principle Jacob urged Esau, and he took his present. Note: it is an excellent thing when men's religion makes them generous, free-hearted, and open-handed, scorning to do a thing that is paltry and sneaking. Numeral 3. About the progress of their journey. Number 1. Esau offers himself to be his guide and companion, in token of sincere reconciliation. Verse 12. We never find that Jacob and Esau were so sociable with one another, and so affectionate, as they were now. Note: as for God, his work is perfect. He made Esau not only an enemy, but a friend. This bone that had been broken, being well set, became stronger than ever. Esau has become fond of Jacob's company, courts him to Mount Seir. Let us never despair of any, nor distrust God, in whose hand all hearts are. Yet Jacob saw cause modestly to refuse his offer. Verse 13 and 14, wherein he shows a tender concern for his own family and flocks. Like a good shepherd and a good father, he must consider the children and the flocks with young, and not lead the one, nor drive the other too fast. This prudence and tenderness of Jacob ought to be imitated by those that have the care and charge of young people in the things of God. They must not be overdriven at first by heavy tasks in religious services, but led as they can bear, having their work made as easy to them as possible. Christ the Good Shepherd does so. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 11. Now Jacob will not desire Esau to slacken his pace, nor force his family to quicken theirs, nor leave them to keep company with his brother, as many would have done, that love any society better than their own house. But he desires Esau to march before, and promises to follow him leisurely as he could get forward. Note, it is an unreasonable thing to tie others to our rate. We may come with comfort at last to the same journey's end, though we do not journey together, either in the same path or with the same pace. There may be those with whom we cannot fall in, and yet with whom we need not fall out by the way. Jacob intimates to him that it was his present design to come to him to Mount Seir, and we may presume he did so after he had settled his family and concerns elsewhere, though that visit is not recorded. Note, when we have happily recovered peace with our friends, we must take care to cultivate it, and not to be behindhand with them in civilities. Number 2. Esau offers some of his men to be his guard and convoy. Verse 15. He saw Jacob but poorly attended, no servants but his husbandmen and shepherds, no pages or footmen, and therefore, thinking he was as desirous as himself, if he could afford it, to take state upon him, and look great, he would needs lend him some of his retinue to attend upon him, that he might appear like Esau's brother. But Jacob humbly refuses his offer, only desiring he would not take it amiss that he did not accept it. What needeth it? 1. Jacob is humble, and needs it not for state. He desires not to make a fair show in the flesh, by encumbering himself with a needless retinue. Note, it is the vanity of pomp and grandeur, that they are attended with a great deal, of which may be said, what needeth it? 2. Jacob is under the divine protection, and needs it not for safety. Note, those are sufficiently guarded that have God for their guard, and under a convoy of his hosts, as Jacob was. Those need not be holden to an arm of flesh, that have God for their arm every morning. Jacob adds, only let me find grace in the sight of my Lord. Having thy favor, I have all I need, all I desire from thee. If Jacob thus valued the goodwill of a brother, much more reason have we to reckon that we have enough if we have the goodwill of our God. Verse 16. So Esau returned that day on his way unto Seir. Verse 17. And Jacob journeyed to Succoth, and built him a house, and made booths for his cattle. Therefore the name of the place is called Succoth. Verse 18. And Jacob came to Shalem, a city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padan Aram, and pitched his tent before the city. Verse 19. And he bought a parcel of field, where he had spread his tent, at the hand of the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. Verse 20. And he erected there an altar, and called it El Elohe Israel. Here, number 1, Jacob comes to Succoth, having in a friendly manner parted with Esau, who had gone to his own country. Verse 16. He comes to a place where, it should seem, he rested for some time, set up booths for his cattle, and other conveniences for himself and family. The place was afterwards known by the name of Succoth, a city in the tribe of Gad, on the other side Jordan. It signifies booths. That when his posterity afterwards dwelt in houses of stone, they might remember that the Syrian ready to perish was their father, who was glad of booths. Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 5. Such was the rock whence they were hewn. Number 2. He comes to Shechem. We read it to Shalem, a city of Shechem. The critics generally inclined to read it appellatively. He came safely, or in peace, to the city of Shechem. After a perilous journey in which he had met with many difficulties, he came safely, at last, into Canaan. Note: diseases and dangers should teach us how to value health and safety, and should help to enlarge our hearts in thankfulness when our going out and coming in have been signally preserved. Here, 1. He buys a field, verse 19. Though the land of Canaan was his by promise, yet the time for taking possession not having yet come, he is content to pay for his own, to prevent disputes with the present occupants. Note: dominion is not founded in grace. Those that have heaven for free cost must not expect to have earth so. 2. He builds an altar, verse 20. 1. In thankfulness to God for the good hand of his providence over him. He did not content himself with verbal acknowledgments of God's favor to him, but made real ones. 2. That he might keep up religion and the worship of God and his family. Note: where we have a tent, God must have an altar. Where we have a house, he must have a church in it. He dedicated this altar to the honor of El Elohe Israel, God, the God of Israel, to the honor of God in general, the only living and true God, the best of beings and first of causes, and to the honor of the God of Israel, as a God in covenant with him. Note: in our worship of God we must be guided and governed by the joint discoveries both of natural and revealed religion. God had lately called him by the name of Israel. Now he calls God the God of Israel. Though he is styled a prince with God, God shall still be a prince with him, his Lord and his God. Note: our honors then become honors indeed to us when they are consecrated to God's honor. Israel's God is Israel's glory. End of chapter 33.